So now let's dive into the series by first explaining what the bottle framework is. So when we talk about a framework, what this is this is a library of code that allows you to extend the capabilities of a programming language. So there is a framework that we use in Silicon Dojo called OpenCV for computer vision, and basically what that framework allows you to do is it allows you to add computer vision to your Python scripts that you're creating so that Python is able to essentially see the world using your webcam and then be able to interact based off of what it sees, right? That's what the OpenCV framework does. So when we're talking about Bottle, what this framework does is it allows you to create web applications. So if you want to create a blogging type application, you can use Bottle. If you're going to create an application, let's say you're going to aggregate news from different sites, you're going to read RSS feeds and then basically display that as like an RSS reader for the user within a web browser, that is something that Bottle will allow you to do. So basically what's going to happen is you're going to code out your web application using Bottle and Python. You are then going to run it, and then when people go to the host name or the domain name or the IP address for your web app, they will then be able to see your web app within a web browser so that they can interact with it. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about the Bottle framework. Now, one of the big things when you start using the Bottle web app framework is to realize that it's a micro framework. It's an eeny weeny teeny tiny framework that basically gives you the capabilities that allows you to create very simple web applications. It's important to understand that. So there's another web app framework you'll hear me talk about a lot called Django. And Django is amazing, right? The first iteration of Instagram was built on Django. Pinterest was built on Django. When you use Django, you get a user account system, you get a back-end administrative dashboard, you get something called an ORM for interacting with databases, you get all the bells and whistles when you're using Django that allows you to create some really, really powerful, scalable web applications. And the important thing to understand is that is not Bottle. Bottle basically allows you to create some pretty simple web pages that can be incredibly useful and valuable to you, but it's not gonna scale the way some of these other web app frameworks will. Again, when you start interacting with a database, so if you're using Django, there's something called an ORM, an ORM, Object Relationship Management system, and basically what that allows you to do is it uses special language for interacting with the database, so you can do queries more efficiently. The important thing to understand in Bottle, at least the vanilla version of Bottle that I'm going to be showing you, is there is no ORM. You're literally going to write SQL statements, and if you want to connect to a SQLite database or MySQL database, that type of deal, you literally have to write out the connection statement for it. You have to do the inserts and the selects and all that kind of stuff, and it's all going to be just basically stock standard SQL. Again, there's no back-end, administration consoles or anything like that. What you get with Bottle is the basics that are required in order to create a web application. So you're going to get the routing functionality. Again, if you're going to be going to different web pages within the web app, Bottle has the functionality that allows you to do that. To get post values, so if somebody is sending values to your web application from something like an HTML form, it does have the basic functionality for that. It has a basic functionality to get values, again, from things like URLs, that type of deal. So basically, when you're dealing with a Bottle, one of the big things to realize is that it's probably a lot more limited than you may be thinking. And one of the reasons that you might be running into problems is that you might be trying to do stuff with it that it just doesn't do. Now, one of the big things that I like about Bottle for educational purposes is that you can actually get the web app up and running simply by running the script itself. There are no external commands in order to run the script to make it work. Basically, within VS Code, you can hit the run button, or if you're just internal, you can do Python 3 and then whatever the script name is. And when you run the script, it actually has started up the web application by doing that, and you can interact with the web app. So this is a very simple Hello World app here. Don't worry about it too much. We'll talk about this in a future session. But basically, just to kind of show you how this works, right? So you're going to, from bottle, so the bottle module, you're going to import the run and the route function. Again, route. This is essentially routing you to the different pages, home, about, whatever else. So a forward slash, means the root, basically the root of the web app. And then what we're going to do is when you go to the root of the web app, we are going to simply return hello world within H1 tags. So that is what your home page is going to look like. Then we have the run function. We define what the host is here, and then the port 8080. So this is where I talked about before for prerequisites, where you do have to understand a little bit about basics of TCP/IP communication. And basically with the port number, this is something called a TCP port. So by default, most websites run on port 80. So when you go to CNN.com, that is actually running on TCP port 80. You don't notice that though, because it's the default port. Here, whenever you use anything other than the default port, you'll have to use the domain name or the IP address colon whatever that port is, and that's how you'll get to the web app. But anyways, this is the very basic what a script looks like. I can then simply go and I can click the run button. I can click the run button, and just by doing that, you can see listening on HTTP localhost colon 8080. I can hit command or control. I can click on that, and I got my app. Yay, right? It says hello world, right? If I come up here to the URL, localhost colon 8080, so this isn't a file, this is actually being delivered by the web server. So we have this quote unquote web app completely up and running simply by writing out the code and then hitting the run button. Now the final thing to talk about is that if you're gonna use Bottle in the real world, what's the speed? What's the performance, right? That's all what all the real coders talk about anymore. You'll hear them talking about these different programming languages and how long it takes, one language to count to 1 billion versus a different language to count to 1 billion, and therefore one language is better than another. One of the things that I want you to be thinking about, again, whenever you create projects or whenever you're deploying projects, is to think about what load you think your system is actually going to be under. So as far as the research that I found talks about it, as far as the speed of Bottle seems to be a pretty fast framework. So you hit the command, you do the submit, and it should work relatively quickly. Now there is a different framework called Fast API that was literally designed to be an incredibly fast framework. So is it as fast as that? No. But one of the things that you have to be thinking though about is basically what load do you think your web app is going to be under? Again, if you're sitting there and you're creating projects to better understand how Python works in the wider world of technology, and you're going to be the only one interacting with this web app, that means it's going to have a load of 1 user. Bottle's going to be fine. Bottle's going to be fine. Right? Even if you deploy this, you create some code, something, create your own API or whatever, you put it up to DigitalOcean. If you're getting 100 people per hour, Bottle's gonna be fine. You get 1,000 people per hour, Bottle's gonna be fine. You get 10,000 people per hour, most likely your issues are going to be more in regards to the resources you paid DigitalOcean for. Have you given it enough RAM? Have you given it enough CPUs? That type of thing. It should be pretty fine. Where the performance really might start having issues from a speed standpoint is if your site, your app is really getting hammered, or it's doing a lot of complicated things on the back end. Things might slow down, but that's where you have to, do testing and you have to do your own research. And that's why, again, there's a dozen different web app frameworks out there. So there might be a better framework for whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. For a lot of the projects that we're going to do, again, if you're an IT professional and you simply need to build an app, so when you go to do site surveys, you have something to basically be able to do automatic site surveys a lot easier. Bottle is going to do great for you. Again, if you have a team, right, if you want to create a work order system or some kind of tracking system for your help desk and you've got 10 people, Bottle's gonna be fine. Again, when we talk about speed and all that kind of stuff, the numbers that are required for that to matter start to be some pretty large numbers. The issue that you will run into, though, with your project, again, imagine if you created some kind of help desk system, is when you get to scaling. Right? So since you don't have this thing called ORM, since you don't have this user account system already built in, since you don't have a lot of these other bells and whistles, when you start building a larger project, Bottle is most likely going to become more difficult to maintain and fully understand what's going on. When you start thinking about having a dev team deal with your project, that is when you're really going to start to understand the limitations of Bottle as you try to figure out who's responsible for what, and then how to determine, who's responsible for what and track that type of deal. So really the issue with Bottle, again, in that kind of production environment world, is more as it starts to get larger, not necessarily with how many users are hitting your web app, but more how many maintainers you have for the web app. That's where you're going to start to notice the limitations of Bottle. And again, that's with everything in technology. Some products are great for certain situations and horrible for others. Bottle is great for relatively small projects. It's not going to be great, again, if you're going to try to create the next Facebook, but that's one of those things you just have to keep in mind.